Could Luke Skywalker master all 4 elements and become the Avatar? Could Avatar Aang be the last of the Jedi? We're gonna find out. As a huge fan of both Star Wars and Avatar the Last Airbender, I have been noticing a few parallels between the 2 stories, and I really wanted to talk about them with you. If you're new here, my name is Crystal Kyber, like the Kyber crystals in Star Wars. I usually talk about Star Wars and do my makeup at the same time, so if you're into those things, hit subscribe. And I think the only other thing I can talk about as much as Star Wars is Avatar the Last Airbender, so that's what we're doing today, so buckle up. And as always, whatever products I'm using will be listed in the description down below, just in case you're interested. It's no big secret that the creators of Avatar the Last Airbender were inspired by Star Wars and many other great stories that came before it. We'll get more into the thematic similarities. First, I want to talk about just some really quick surface level similarities. Before becoming George Lucas's Padawan and working on the Clone Wars and then later becoming Lucasfilm's chief creative officer, Dave Filoni worked as a storyboard artist on the first season of Avatar the Last Airbender. Dave Filoni also directed 9 episodes in the first season. I don't know if you know anything about Dave Filoni lore, but when I watch Avatar the Last Airbender now, I can distinctly tell what is Dave Filoni and what's not. For example, everyone knows that, well, now you know, but a lot of people know that Dave Filoni loves Godzilla. So in the last episode of season 1, Aang turns into this big giant spirit fish, very reminiscent of Godzilla. And anytime I see that, or the Zillo Beast, or anything that is remotely similar to Godzilla, I'm like, that's Filoni. Dave Filoni also included a nod to his time on Avatar the Last Airbender in the Clone Wars. He had a cloned named Appo, A-P-P-O, and he even included the little airbending symbol on the clone's helmet, which so cute. Some other cute little crossovers that we have. Mark Hamill, our Luke Skywalker, voices Firelord Ozai. He's perfect for that role. Gray DeLise, who is the voice actor for Azula, she voices a version of Padme in the Clone Wars, as well as several other characters in Star Wars across video games and animation. Jason Isaacs, who voices General Zhao, also voices the Inquisitor from Rebels Season 1. Finally, we have D. Bradley Baker, who voices all of the clones in the Clone Wars, probably several other characters as well, and he also does the voices for Appa and Momo. Avatar the Last Airbender was originally conceptualized as a futuristic fantasy. Does that sound familiar? I also want to acknowledge that both franchises are heavily influenced by Asian culture. Not only does Star Wars borrow a lot of aesthetic from Asian cultures, but they also heavily rely on cinematic storytelling from samurai movies and other Japanese movies. A lot of what Avatar the Last Airbender does is pay homage or pays its respects to the animes that came before it. Avatar the Last Airbender has 3 seasons, and the original trilogy of Star Wars is 3 movies, which may sound kind of trivial, but there's actually a lot of very similar storytelling beats, archetypes, and characters, and they both follow a 3-act structure. It's actually kind of cool when I started looking into this. I don't think I realized how similar these stories were. When I talk about Star Wars in this video, I'm only referring to the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Both Star Wars and Avatar the Last Airbender follow what we call a monomyth, or the hero's journey. It's a common template used by storytellers that have been used for hundreds of years. Once you see it, you're not going to be able to unsee it. It's everywhere in media. It's Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, it's Star Wars. It's a very common storytelling trope or way of telling a story. Hero's journey has been around forever, basically. So who are the heroes in our hero journey? It's Luke Skywalker, of course, and it's Avatar Aang, of course. Both Aang and Luke have spiritual aid, and they can kind of be considered the same thing in this context. We have the Force and we have the Avatar state. Now, I know in Avatar the Last Airbender, there are benders everywhere. You have earthbenders, waterbenders, etc. But you only have one avatar. You only have one person who can master all 4 elements. And in the case of Luke Skywalker, even though there are other Jedi, at this point in the trilogy, as far as we know, he is the last of the Jedi. Let's start at Act 1, A New Hope. Water. if you will. Both stories start out at backwater parts of their own universes, so the South Pole and Tatooine. And they immediately make friends with people who are going to help them with their journey. So we have both Leia and Katara, who are the love interests. We have Han and Sokka, who is the sarcastic non-believer who eventually comes around. And then we have a few other characters that don't exactly match up with each other, which is to be expected. And I'm not really saying that Katara and Leia are the same character, nor Han and Sokka, but I'm just kind of using them as like archetype examples. These next few characters they're like loosely the same archetype, if not multiple of the same archetype. So we have our furry friends and our non-verbal comic relief. So this is Chewbacca. This is Momo and Appa. Now they're not exactly the same in terms of like what roles they're playing, but it's kind of like the same archetypes. We could also say that Avatar Roku is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the show, and Guru Pathik is Master Yoda. He's like the eccentric old guru that lives by himself and is really, really old. I also feel like Iroh can fit into like this guiding mentor teacher guiding role. Iroh could also be the Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Yoda, even though he is like the enemy at the beginning. Initially, our heroes refuse their call to adventure. Luke doesn't want to go to Alderaan. He doesn't want to leave Tatooine. He has too much going for him on his farm. Aang doesn't want to face the responsibility of being the Avatar when there's like a huge war happening. Like, he's a kid. I don't blame him. But to take it a step further, they both accept the call to adventure when they lose their whole family. I know Aang loses his family 100 years prior, but he's just finding out. Like, to him, this just happened like days ago. Like, he just lost his family. And it wasn't until Aang really saw what the Fire Nation did to his family and his home, that's when he kind of like begins to accept his role as the Avatar. And a similar thing happens to Luke. After he finds that his whole family has been slaughtered, that's kind of when he accepts that he is going to go on this great adventure. Over the course of their 3-act hero's journey, they're going to go through training, they're going to face setbacks, and they're ultimately going to grow and find their power and become the one. They're going to run into their antagonists. Speaking of, both Star Wars and Avatar the Last Airbender have a series of 2 antagonists, which I think is very interesting. Now, for Avatar the Last Airbender, we have our supporting antagonists, and there's 3 of them that kind of fall into this. We have General Zhao, Azula, and Zuko sometimes. In Star Wars, this would be Darth Vader. This set of antagonists, they answer to a more supreme leader, and that would be Palpatine or Fire Lord Ozai. The Fire Nation is very reminiscent of the Empire. Both of them are metaphors for an authoritarian regimen rising, coming into power. They're both dictators with a faceless army. And both stories kind of highlight the struggle between the oppressor and the oppressed. And they do it a little bit differently. Star Wars is more about like a rebellion versus the oppressor, while Avatar takes a more personal approach, and you really get to hear this story through like individuals. At the end of this first act, so at the end of A New Hope and at the end of season 1, both of our heroes use their special abilities to win against the enemy. Avatar Aang uses the Avatar state and turns into a giant fish Godzilla monster, destroys the city, defeats the Fire Nation. Luke Skywalker uses the Force to take down the Death Star. It's kind of like their first dip into the water, so to speak, when it comes to using their special abilities. Aang doesn't really have full control of himself in the Avatar state. It's more of like a reactionary or survival state, whereas Luke kind of follows his instincts. He is using the Force and Obi-Wan is guiding him, but Luke doesn't really know what it is yet. At this point, them using their special abilities is very like new and very fresh for them. Second movie, the second season, is one of many setbacks, many trials, many tribulations. In both Avatar and in Star Wars, our trio splits up. They end up going their separate ways for a little bit. Luke goes to train with Yoda on Dagobah and to learn the ways of the Force, and is really bratty the whole time, but you know. And Aang goes to train with Guru Pathik to master the Avatar state because he just kind of realizes he doesn't really know how to use it. In both of their trainings, they have to face their darkest selves. literally and metaphorically. They both also must work on accepting themselves. They have to accept that there is dark, there is good, there is bad in everyone. But both Luke and Aang choose to abandon their training early, like because they receive a vision that their friends are in trouble. They're not doing okay. It's a trap. In the second season of Avatar the Last Airbender, the gang makes it to Ba Sing Se. It's just like their city of refuge, the city that they've been trying to get to forever. And much like in Empire Strikes Back, Cloud City, something is off. Something is kind of weird. It doesn't feel safe. Just like on Cloud City, Ba Sing Se has been infiltrated by the enemy. Lando is actually working for Vader. I mean, not on purpose, but you know, he's being manipulated or blackmailed to work for the Empire. And Azula is parading around like a Kyoshi warrior. There really is no happy ending here for Team Avatar and for Star Wars. Team Avatar suffers a great loss with Aang's death at the hands of Azula. He dies at the end of season 2. It's a very similar loss to Han Solo getting frozen in carbonite. I know Han Solo isn't our hero, but I would say the loss is just as devastating. In this third act, we really see where the stories start to deviate from one another, but there's still some similarities, and we're still going to talk about it. The biggest takeaway between these two stories is that this is when our heroes face their main antagonist. And yes, I'm jumping right to the end because there's not a whole lot in this third act that really lines up with each other, except for this part, except for the ending. And even here, there are some differences. We have Luke versus Vader, but we don't have Aang versus Zuko or Azula. Something that we do have in common with both of these fights, these final battles, is both Luke and Aang are able to win against the main antagonist. I was going to say protagonist, but they both win against the main antagonist without having to sacrifice themselves or their morals. Both Aang and Luke are able to master their respective magic powers. Aang is able to master the Avatar state, and Luke is able to become a Jedi Master by the end of it, like his father before him. Aang faces off against Fire Lord Ozai, and he's like really torn up about it because he doesn't believe in killing the Fire Lord, and so he ends up using energy bending and taking away his bending powers, which we're not going to get into that. It happens. It is what it is at this point. Deus ex machina? I don't know how to say that word, but you know what I'm saying. But Aang doesn't give up his morals. And it's very similar to Luke being tempted by the dark side, from Palpatine to K-Word, his father, to give in to his anger. And he doesn't. And it ultimately saves his father, who is redeemed in the end. And his father is the one that kills Palpatine. I mean, technically, Luke did, Vader did. It's all the same thing to me. Even though it happens at different times in the stories, both of our heroes redeem or help redeem an antagonist that has been menacing them from the beginning. Ultimately, both of our heroes have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to their new empire. Just kidding. But both of our heroes have brought peace and balance to their respective galaxies, universes. I fully acknowledge that these two stories are not the same. And I know that the creators of Avatar the Last Airbender have cited Star Wars as one of their inspirations, and I think it shows, but I don't think it means that they took Star Wars and made it Avatar, or they made Avatar into Star Wars. I think if there's any sort of crossover in these two universes, Luke would absolutely be the Avatar. And I think that Aang would definitely be a Jedi Master. I mean, they both are the one, and they both bring balance to their respective universes. Like, it just makes so much sense. I'm gonna give you my opinion on something, but okay, now stay with me here. I have been a big fan of Avatar for a really long time, like 15 years. Maybe longer. I used to exist on Tumblr back in the day, and I remember when Brian and Mike, the two co-creators of Avatar the Last Airbender, they also used to be very active on Tumblr. And honestly, when I think about it now, it was such a special time to be interacting with the creators of Avatar the Last Airbender, like their Q&A things on Tumblr. They used to reblog a bunch of like fan art and fan stuff and like write their own little tidbits about it, about the show. They would also share their sketches and their drawings and just like whatever they were working on. It was truly a time to be an Avatar fan. It was amazing. Don't quote me on this because I have scrubbed the internet the last few days looking for this and I couldn't find it. I tried looking through the archives, I searched through Tumblr, but I can't find it anywhere, so I could just be making this up. This could just be like a headcanon that like lodged itself in my brain and now it's just become like real to me. Aang is basically Luke Skywalker. Like Aang is the story's Luke Skywalker, and I know I just kind of like talked about this in the whole video, but I specifically remember this coming from like the writers or the creators. Basically in the context of saying that Aang wasn't supposed to end up with anyone at the end of the story, much like Luke Skywalker doesn't end up with anyone at the story. The hero doesn't have like a love interest at the end of Star Wars. Luke Skywalker doesn't end up with Leia for obvious reasons, but Aang ends up with Katara, and I know y'all are gonna come for me on this one, but I know that Katara and Aang are endgame, but I really believe that it should have been Zutara, and I am Zutara till the end. I am Zutara forever. You know, I love all the ships. I love Katara and Aang. I love Zuko and Mai. I love Zuko and Sokka. I love Suki and Sokka. Like, I love all the ships. I don't discriminate, but Zutara is my OTP. I'm really feeling like that meme from It's Always Sunny. Anyways, if Aang is Luke and Katara is Leia, why did Katara and Aang end up together? That's what I want to know. And no, I did not just make this whole video I didn't just make this whole video to funnel you all into the Zutara, show you the light towards Zutara. I'm just saying that there are a lot of things thematically, and there are a lot of things that allude to Zutara being endgame, but that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother thing that I cannot get into right now. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I really love both Avatar the Last Airbender and Star Wars. They're amazing and I can get lost in their world. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, if you think that Aang would be a Jedi Master and if Luke would be the Avatar. I'd love to know if you noticed any similarities that I missed. You know I love talking to you in the comments, so let's talk in the comments. I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day and may the Force be with you. Also, Wada Tribe.